Good morning. Today's conversation is anchored in this question, the hidden intelligence in emotions. What if I told you that everything that you have been taught about emotional intelligence is only half the story? When it comes to emotional intelligence, the way we see it and the way we relate to it is that I am emotionally intelligent when I can identify, regulate, manage my emotions, and also understand the emotions of others in a realm where it feels as if my primary job as a leader, as a business owner, as a team member is to do something about my emotions. Well, today's conversation is about this. There is a big blind spot when it comes to emotional intelligence. See, when it comes to emotional intelligence, I assume that I, as the human being, is the intelligent factor in the mix. What if, what if the emotions themselves were a source of intelligence? That's the point of today's conversation. The point of today's conversation is that as leaders, as team members, as a business owner, I get really busy trying to manage my emotions and the emotions of others, leaving on the table the intelligence that comes with the emotions. So today's conversation is about tapping into that. What if leaders were like the CIA? Now, picture for a moment. You've got the Central Intelligence Agency. You've got the MI6 in Great Britain. When they're looking to deal with an issue and make critical decisions, you know what they do? They gather intelligence. In fact, they have spies who gather information. They analyze that information, and then they use that information as a source of intelligence to inform critical decisions. What if we leaders did the same thing with our emotions? That's the point of today's conversation. We're not going to dive deep into anything mysterious. It is simply that. The blind spot is that as a leader, as a business owner, I dismiss or even I'm blind to the fact that my emotions and the emotions of others is a source of intelligence. So let's take an example for a moment. Um, I'm actually going to a meeting after this occasion, and I found myself this morning rather tense, frustrated, somewhat disturbed. Ordinarily, I would think, maybe if I play my favorite song, my favorite tune, that emotion will go away. As it turns out, that never works. It just creates more noise. So, in teams, in corporations, when emotions are present, most people find themselves working really hard to deal with the emotion, to do something to make it go away, to do something to soothe themselves, to do something to deal with the emotions of others, and to do something to soothe the emotion of others. That's what people call emotional intelligence. How well can I survive in the face of flaring emotions, whether they're flaring hard or flaring just a little? Today's conversation is about flipping the script on emotions. What if there is no need whatsoever to deal with the emotions as something to either get rid of if they're judged? If I judge it a negative emotion, I'll do everything I can to get rid of it. Or if I judge it a good emotion, I'll do everything I can to get more of it. That is not the point of emotional intelligence. The point of emotional intelligence is to mine the emotions that show up exactly for what they are. And I'm proposing to you that what emotions are, there are trusted guideposts to something bigger than themselves and bigger than you. So what is that? Let's pause for a moment and create together that we can use our emotions as guideposts to the conversations that we can have, only which will resolve the emotion. So here's the deal. So this morning, guess what I did? I paused and I said to myself, I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling disturbed. What is that emotion pointing to in terms of a conversation I can have or a message I can send? So I paused, I stopped, I pulled the car over, and I pulled out my phone and I typed the text message that said to the person in question who's leading the meeting that I'm going to, I am late. Here's what's happening. I promise you that I will arrive between 9:30 a.m. and 9:45 a.m. That communication ordinarily is a communication human beings are unwilling to have. I'd rather push through the frustration, push through the disturbance, and get to the point where I simply survive what's happening or not. So this is the point, folks. Your emotions, whether you're on a team, whether you're the company owner, whether you're the senior executive leading this team, your emotions and the emotions of others are not the end in themselves, meaning your job, my job, is not to deal with those emotions, to make them go away. Rather, we together, individually, can seize those emotions as trusted guideposts to the conversations we're not willing to have or would never have anyway. Now, here's the approach. Whatever it is you're feeling inside, regardless of what the circumstances are, regardless of who's involved, pause for a moment and ask yourself this precise question. What conversation is this emotion or those emotions asking me to go have? And when it comes to the emotions of others, when they show up, you can use them the same way. What conversation are their emotions pointing to that I need to have with them? And then the moment that's you distinguish that, it doesn't matter if you know what to say or know what to do. Take the action and go have that conversation with the person that matters. And continue to have that conversation until the emotions themselves resolve. And what that points to is this. If the emotion is your guidepost to a conversation you have been avoiding or unwilling to have, when you have that conversation, the emotion may not go away immediately. It will linger until you have had the conversation you need to have. And now you might be asking yourself, so what types of conversations are we pointing to? I'm asserting, and I'm giving you today this practical tip. Whenever there's an emotion present, that emotion is pointing to two types of conversations that you need to have as a leader, as a team member, as a business owner, as someone who's in any human relationship. Conversation type number one. Whenever you have an emotion, that emotion is connected directly and is a guidepost to an area of your life, an area of your business where you made a promise or had agreements and you have not kept those promises or honored those agreements in the way you know to and in the way you said you would. So what's the conversation you're going to have in this case? A conversation to restore your word in that matter. So this is radical, folks. I'm saying to you that whenever you have an unresolved emotion, it is a guidepost to two types of conversations. The first is a conversation to restore your word in the matter of promises you made and agreements you signed up to. And the conversation you need to have in that case is a conversation that does exactly that. In the case of my driving this morning, the nature of my message to the person in charge was simply this: I promised you I would arrive at 9:30, and I will arrive between 9:30 and 9:45. That simple communication restored something near and dear to me. In teams and organizations and companies, unless you and I, as leaders, make it our business to continually restore the power of what we say, an agreement we made, promises we made, what ensues are a series of emotions and body sensations that, as a leader, as a team member, I end up, as a result of the blind spot, I end up spending all of my resources, all of my time dealing with the emotion, as opposed to capturing the emotion for what it is, a guidepost to a conversation to restore the agreements and promises I made. That's the first type of conversation. The second type of conversation is it's a bit more testing. It is a conversation where you are not the one who made the promise. You are not the one who made the agreement, and you're not the one breaking either. It is somebody else, a team member, your boss, your significant other, some company who sold you something and it didn't work. It's the kind of conversation where someone other than you, some group outside of you, who made promises and made agreements, is not honoring them. And it's your turn to have a conversation to hold that person or that group accountable. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, that sounds simple. A conversation to hold someone else accountable is something, it's logical. And yet, very few people, very few team members actually operate that way. This is an invitation to operate in these two worlds. The world where your emotions and the emotions of others point to something other than my job to deal with emotions. It points to two conversations to have. One conversation is to restore my word in the matter of my agreements and my promises, and the other is to request of another to do exactly that, restore his or her word in the matter of their agreements and promises. And when that happens, something gets resolved at the level of the brain, your brain, their brain, and the emotion dissipates, and the space that gets created is a space where performance is possible. And what do I mean by performance? Performance is the space where you and others are in action, actions that are consistent with fulfilling the promises and the agreements you made. Absent that, folks, the actions I'm taking, the actions you're taking, are doing nothing more and nothing less than serving our innate need to survive the emotions we have. So today's conversation is for your peace of mind. Today's conversation is for your teams performing at the highest level possible. Today's conversation is for you, the leader or the owner of an organization, to continually create an environment where who you are and what you do is all about performance. Performance in this sense, that your actions and the actions of others are firmly anchored in the agreements and the promises you made. Zero actions, zero energy being committed to dealing with your emotions or the emotions of others. So I'm going to pause here before we wrap up to ask you in the audience what you're thinking, and to ask you to look right now, even right now, you may be sensing some emotion, regardless of what that emotion is, positive or negative. It's pointing to a conversation you have been avoiding or unwilling to have. And and essentially, we can co-create emotional intelligence in a collective fashion, where one is, it's not like I'm holding you accountable to be emotionally intelligent. I'm paving the way with every conversation for you to have the opportunity to practice being emotionally intelligent. And what that means, it's not that you're regulating your emotions. It doesn't mean you're suppressing them. It doesn't mean you're embarrassed to say, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I feel demeaned. No, it doesn't mean that. It means exactly the opposite. Everyone in the environment is now looking at emotions and feelings as guideposts to conversations that matter. So it is in the interest of everyone to actually say what I'm feeling, to actually give language to the emotions that are there. And then for everyone to be looking at the collective emotion or what's present in a room and say, what conversation or conversations is that pointing to? And more than likely, the conversations they're pointing to are in the realm of me taking responsibility for the promises and agreements I've either broken or not kept on time, or for them to give me the permission and give each other the permission to do the same. So this whole game, it may sound like an oversimplification, and I'm doing it purposefully, purposefully to point to the possibility that maybe the majority of the emotions that we as humanity, we as leaders and business owners work really hard to survive, fall in these two categories, where they're all emotions that surface when I am not tending to the integrity of my promises and my agreements, or where I am not holding others accountable for doing the same. Oversimplification, but guess what? I'm inviting each and every one of you to go practice this week, even if you do it just for 1 week, for this week only. When an emotion shows up, do this. Don't fix it. Resist the temptation to take any action that will have the emotion go away, that will have you feel better. Resist that. When the emotion shows up, notice it and say, here is a guidepost to a conversation that I have not been having. And then pause and look. Look for the promises you made and the agreements you made, and see where there are any that you have not kept or honored. And then get in communication. And if it's not you and it's another, have the courage to walk to that person, not any other person, that person or that group, and make a request or even demand that they be accountable for their promises and agreements that way. In that world, folks, I guarantee you the performance that your team will experience will be night and day from what you're experiencing today. Why? Because you're taking all of the energy, all of the time, all of the money spent on dealing with the emotions, and you're shifting it to the actions that matter. Actions that are consistent with the fulfillment of your promises and your agreements. Simple, yet hard to do. Not hard to do because the actions are hard. Hard to do because that's not the way we operate. So, will you promise me to do that? When the emotion shows up, don't do anything about it. See it as a guidepost to a conversation you have not been willing to have, and watch your performance soar. Folks, thank you for the space for this conversation to happen. And I also thank you in advance for being people who are actually going to practice this. Because my commitment and the commitment of the Daily Huddle is that the performance of the companies we serve, the companies we run, rises. And if your performance can rise as a result of you practicing just those three little things, that will be my biggest reward.